The sun was just climbing over the skyline, painting the half-built buildings with a golden glow. Wilma tightened her hard hat and adjusted her reflective vest, trying to ignore the smell of fresh concrete and the constant hum of machinery. Another day at the construction site, another round of long hours, dust in her hair and the never-ending echo of drills and hammers. She had been here for years, learning the ins and outs of project management, handling crews twice her size, and making sure deadlines were met. Most people saw her as just another worker on the site, someone blending into the chaos, but today felt different. As she walked past the steel beams and half-finished walls, she could feel the tension in the air. Some of the workers were glancing at her, whispering under their breath, exchanging smirks. Wilma shook it off. She was used to it. She knew the work. She knew the stakes. And she knew how to handle problems before they became disasters. Still, there was a flicker of nervousness she couldn't shake. Then she heard it. A laugh. Not just any laugh. A mocking, condescending laugh coming from across the site. She glanced over and saw him. Jake, one of the newest hires, leaning against a stack of lumber, pointing in her direction. His grin was wide, eyes filled with amusement, as if he had just spotted the world's biggest joke. Wilma froze for a second. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to continue with her inspection and let his ignorance slide, but another part of her, the part that had fought tooth and nail to climb every rung of the ladder in a male-dominated industry, felt a spark of challenge ignite. "What does he think he's doing?" she muttered under her breath. The words barely carried over the sound of the drills and engines, but they were enough for her own confidence to rally. She tightened her grip on the clipboard in her hands, feeling the smooth, familiar weight grounding her. She could hear the faint whistling of the wind, the rhythmic pounding of hammers, and the distant honk of a truck delivering supplies. Everything around her screamed normalcy, but she knew this encounter wouldn't be. Wilma's mind raced. "He doesn't know who I am, yet." Her pulse quickened, not out of fear, but anticipation. She remembered her father's words years ago when she first started. "Respect isn't given, Wilma. You earn it, sometimes the hard way." Today, it seemed, she would have a chance to prove that again. She walked closer, each step deliberate, boots crunching against gravel. The mocking laugh had stopped, replaced by a puzzled frown on his face as he noticed her approach. Wilma kept her face calm, but inside her thoughts spun. Does he really think this is funny? Does he even realize he's laughing at the person in charge? And then, just as she reached the center of the site, her eyes locked with his, and in that brief moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him, clipboard in hand, helmet slightly tilted, was the one running the entire project. And that's when Wilma knew. Today, the joke wasn't on her. The morning had barely begun, but Wilma was already in motion. Her boots crunched against the gravel, echoing across the half-finished foundation. She squinted against the sun bouncing off steel beams, surveying the site that was both her responsibility and her battlefield. It wasn't the first challenge she faced today. One of the cranes had stalled, leaving a precarious stack of beams wobbling dangerously above the workers. Wilma knew she had seconds to act. Her mind raced as she calculated the safest way to secure the load without stopping the work entirely. "Watch the stack," she called out, her voice cutting through the din of the machinery. A few workers glanced up, startled, then scrambled into action. A bead of sweat slid down her temple. Every day brought something new, some hazard she had to anticipate, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavier than the steel overhead. Her thoughts flickered briefly to Jake, the man who had laughed at her only moments ago. She didn't have time for him yet, but the memory of his smirk irritated her. He didn't know her role, didn't respect the hierarchy, didn't realize the authority she wielded in every corner of the site. That ignorance was dangerous. She needed compliance, precision, respect, and he had shown none. Wilma moved from one section to another, inspecting the reinforcements and rebar, the dust settling in thick clouds with each step. The sound of hammering was relentless, punctuated by the occasional shout or clang of metal against metal. She could smell the acrid tang of fresh concrete, mixed with the faint sweetness of oil and gasoline. Each sensory detail was a reminder. She was alive, alert, and needed to stay that way. By mid-morning, her phone buzzed. A supplier had delayed a critical shipment of steel, threatening to push back the schedule. Wilma pinched the bridge of her nose, taking a quick breath. Of course, today of all days, she thought, feeling the familiar knot of tension tighten in her stomach. Every problem felt magnified in front of the team, and she hated showing weakness. She squared her shoulders, summoned a deep breath, and began drafting a contingency plan in her head. But problems weren't only logistical. Social obstacles lurked everywhere. Several of the workers whispered as she passed, some casting sly glances, others openly questioning her instructions. Wilma felt the sting of underestimation, the subtle dismissal that came from being a woman in charge on a male-dominated construction site. She hated it, not because she doubted herself, but because it slowed down progress, bred unnecessary mistakes, and risked accidents. A gust of wind carried the sound of laughter again. Wilma's pulse quickened. Jake. He hadn't even been near the unstable stack of beams, yet somehow his confidence made others second-guess orders, and that could be catastrophic. She clenched her fists inside her gloves, reminding herself she needed strategy, not confrontation. She walked toward the scaffold where the team was assembling the next floor. The height always made her stomach flutter, and today was no exception. One misstep could mean disaster, not just for her, but for everyone. She paused for a moment, gripping the railing, feeling the cold steel bite through her gloves. Stay focused, she told herself. Control what you can, react to what you can't. A sudden shout drew her attention. A worker had dropped a wrench from the upper floor, and it clattered dangerously close to a colleague's foot. Wilma's heart leapt. "Watch out," she yelled, sprinting forward, guiding the worker out of harm's way. The danger passed, but her nerves remained frayed, reminding her that at any moment chaos could erupt. Even as she handled the emergencies, her mind wandered to the project's budget, tighter than she had ever experienced. Costs were rising, suppliers were unreliable, and upper management was breathing down her neck for updates. Every decision had consequences, and mistakes weren't just embarrassing, they could cost lives. Yet Wilma couldn't dwell. She needed to maintain authority. She strode past Jake, who gave her a cocky grin. The briefest flicker of annoyance passed over her face, quickly replaced by measured composure. Ignore him. Focus on the work. Let your actions speak. By late morning, another complication appeared. One of the concrete mixers stalled, leaking thick, wet concrete onto the gravel. The team scrambled to contain the mess, while Wilma coordinated adjustments to keep the schedule on track. Sweat streamed down her back. Her gloves were smeared with wet concrete. Every step required concentration, each command precise. One wrong word or delayed instruction could escalate into a serious accident. And then came the human challenge. A senior worker, skeptical of Wilma's leadership, openly questioned her instructions in front of the team. His tone was sharp, mocking, a direct challenge to her authority. Wilma felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. She could see the younger workers looking to see how she'd respond. This was a test, and she needed to pass convincingly. She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting his. "I understand your concern," she said firmly, "but the plan has been reviewed, and safety comes first. Follow the protocol or stop and I'll explain step by step." Her voice was calm but commanding. The subtle pause before he nodded gave her a quiet thrill of victory. She had maintained control without escalation. As Wilma continued her rounds, she noticed something else. A loose plank on the scaffold. If a worker stepped there, it could break, causing injury. She didn't hesitate. Climbing swiftly, she tightened it herself, muttering instructions to ensure no one walked near it until secure. The adrenaline pumped through her veins, and the sweat clung to her skin. The day was relentless, and she was at the center of it all. The crew's chatter buzzed around her. Complaints about heat, frustration over delays, jokes about incompetence. Wilma filtered it all, focusing only on what mattered. Ignore the noise. Focus on results. Safety first. Her mind was a calculator of risk, resource allocation, and timing, spinning faster than any machine on site. The wind shifted, blowing dust into her eyes, making her blink. She felt the sting, but didn't pause. Machines groaned under load, beams swayed, power tools whined. Her senses were constantly on alert. Every sound, smell, or shift in light could signal a potential problem. She thrived in this chaos, but it was exhausting. Midday brought the next challenge. A minor injury. One worker had twisted his ankle while moving a heavy load. Wilma immediately assessed the situation, directing 2 colleagues to assist and making sure the injured man was safe. She called the on-site medic, instructed the first aid team, and ensured the injured worker wasn't left alone. Every second counts, she thought, feeling the weight of responsibility settle even heavier on her shoulders. Even small victories were fleeting. Wilma noticed another worker ignoring her safety instructions, hastily moving near a wet patch of concrete. She dashed forward, grabbing his arm. "Careful, watch your step." The worker scowled but complied. She sighed, mentally tallying the constant stream of hazards and personalities she needed to manage. And then, her gaze fell on Jake again. He was leaning casually, smirking, chatting with a few others. Wilma's pulse quickened, not from fear but anticipation. He was oblivious, but his presence had already caused ripple effects. Other workers were distracted, some hesitating, others joking nervously. His ignorance could have caused a disaster. Wilma reminded herself: patience, strategy, authority. Show, don't yell. Every action mattered. Every word carried weight. She moved across the site, coordinating, correcting, anticipating, all while her mind ticked through scenarios for the next obstacles. The sun climbed higher, the heat pressed down, but she pressed on, determined to maintain control. Somewhere in the background, she caught the subtle glances of the young apprentice, wide-eyed and absorbing everything. That small moment reminded her why she fought so hard: to set an example, to prove that competence and leadership weren't defined by gender. By the time lunch approached, fatigue was setting in. Muscles ached, throat dry, mind racing, yet Wilma stood tall, scanning the site, noting the progress and the problems yet unresolved. The true test was still ahead, the one that would push her patience, authority, and nerves to the limit. And somewhere across the site, Jake continued to smirk, oblivious to the fact that Wilma wasn't just surviving this chaos, she was commanding it. He has no idea what's coming next. The sun had risen high now, casting long shadows across the construction site. The day had already tested Wilma in ways that felt endless, yet the real challenge had only just begun. Machines groaned under the heat, steel beams shimmered in the sun, and the buzz of activity seemed almost deafening. But Wilma noticed a shift in the energy of the site. Something, or someone, was about to change everything. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement near the entrance. A man had appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, carrying a clipboard of his own. His clothes were neat, pressed, almost out of place among the dusty overalls and hard hats. He walked with a casual confidence, scanning the site as though it belonged to him. Wilma's instincts flared immediately. He was new, but not just another worker. His presence demanded attention, and it disturbed the rhythm she had painstakingly maintained all morning. The workers glanced at him, some whispering, some nudging each other. He nodded casually to a few, his smile easy, disarming. But Wilma wasn't fooled. There was something deliberate in his steps, a subtle authority hiding behind charm. She narrowed her eyes, observing him from a distance as she coordinated the crew around a shipment of steel. Every action, every glance was calculated. She could tell he wasn't just passing through. A whistle pierced the air and all eyes turned toward the newcomer. He lifted his hand in greeting, the sun catching the gleam of a watch on his wrist. Wilma took a slow breath, feeling her pulse quicken, not from fear but anticipation. Her mind catalogued every detail: his stance, the way he measured the space, the faint smirk that hinted at confidence, maybe even arrogance. Who is this guy? And why does he feel significant? As he approached the central scaffolding, Wilma noticed something unusual. He carried himself with a certain ease, moving past potential hazards without hesitation, assessing risks instinctively. He wasn't just a visitor. He had knowledge of construction, perhaps even more than some of the crew. A twinge of curiosity pierced her usual professional detachment. Could he be inspecting the project, or is this a surprise visit from upper management? Before she could act, he stopped abruptly, glancing toward Jake, the same man who had laughed at her earlier. Wilma's heart sank briefly, fearing confrontation, but the newcomer's next move surprised her. He leaned slightly toward Jake, whispered something, and both men laughed, not mockingly, but in genuine amusement. Wilma's brow furrowed. Something about this felt off. Her pulse quickened as she moved closer. The workers seemed unaware of the subtle tension building. Wilma's mind raced. Should I approach now, or wait and observe? She chose strategy. Staying visible, she let the man continue, her eyes never leaving his movements. She noted how he made small adjustments to the equipment, offering suggestions that were clearly practical, smart, precise. The man had authority, but was he a threat? Then it happened. He looked up, directly at her for the first time. Their eyes locked across the construction chaos. Time seemed to slow. He tilted his head slightly, curious, almost amused, as though trying to assess her in an instant. Wilma held his gaze, her hands gripping the clipboard tighter, feeling the smooth weight grounding her. The workers nearby noticed the interaction and whispered among themselves. "Who's that guy? Is he some big-shot inspector? Does he even know Wilma's running this?" Wilma's mind raced, calculating every possible scenario. Does he think I'm just another worker? Or has he noticed something already? A sudden commotion drew her attention. One of the cranes had shifted slightly, the steel cable groaning under tension. Without thinking, Wilma sprinted toward it, issuing quick commands. The man followed her effortlessly, matching her pace without hesitating, assisting the workers calmly. She realized with a flicker of surprise that he wasn't clumsy or ignorant. He understood the site, the risks, the mechanics. Wilma's thoughts spun. Who is he? How does he know so much? She had never met anyone like him on the site, someone who could blend authority and skill so seamlessly without even introducing himself formally. Yet the more she watched, the more she realized his intentions were curious, not hostile. There was a subtle playfulness in the way he moved, a lightness that contrasted with the tension of the day. Her pulse quickened as she approached a stack of lumber that needed immediate attention. "Watch your footing," she shouted, motioning to two workers. The man stepped forward instinctively, lending a hand. Their hands briefly touched as they adjusted the load together. A spark of recognition flashed. Mutual understanding, respect silently acknowledged in a shared glance. Wilma felt a flicker of tension, and something else, something she hadn't expected. The man smiled, a small, confident smile that didn't undermine her authority, but subtly challenged it. He spoke lightly, joking about the chaotic nature of the site, and for a moment Wilma caught herself laughing along despite the stress. It was an unexpected human connection, a brief reprieve from the relentless pressure. Yet beneath the humor, Wilma felt the tension ratchet higher. This man, this stranger, was clearly significant. The way he commanded attention without demanding it, the ease with which he navigated the hazards, and the subtle glances he shared with the crew, it all pointed to something more. She had dealt with arrogance before, but never with someone who balanced confidence and competence so effortlessly. Her mind raced as she calculated next steps. She could confront him directly, assert her authority immediately, but something told her patience would yield more insight. She observed, waiting for the moment when his knowledge or intentions would become undeniable, and she sensed that moment was approaching. Then Jake, oblivious as ever, made a joke, pointing toward Wilma. Laughter erupted among a few workers. Wilma's eyes narrowed, but before she could intervene, the stranger stepped in, calmly redirecting the conversation, subtly undercutting Jake without embarrassing him. The dynamic shifted instantly. The crew looked at the stranger with renewed respect. Wilma's pulse quickened, not from fear but from recognition. He was someone who could read the room as well as she could. The day pressed on, but the stranger remained. He moved from zone to zone, offering small suggestions, correcting minor errors, all without asserting dominance overtly. Wilma followed, silently observing, noting every action, every glance. The suspense built. Who was he really? Was he visiting, inspecting, or was there something else at play? Finally, the moment came. Wilma coordinated a complicated lift, directing the team with precision. The stranger stepped forward to assist, offering guidance that perfectly complemented her commands. The workers around them paused, realizing the seamless collaboration. And then, in a quiet, almost casual voice, he said, "I see why she's the one in charge." Wilma froze. The words cut through the noise of the site. Her gaze locked on him, disbelief mixed with satisfaction. The stranger had not mocked her, had not underestimated her. Instead, he recognized her authority, her skill, her leadership, without a word wasted. The realization hit her. This wasn't just any visitor. He had observed, assessed, and acknowledged her. The irony wasn't lost on her. Jake had laughed, unaware that Wilma was not just competent, but the boss of the entire operation. Now the stranger had seen it all, the true orchestrator of the chaos, the one running the site with precision and calm. Wilma felt a surge of pride and subtle amusement. The joke had been on Jake, not her. And the stranger? He had witnessed it unfold, a silent witness to her command. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, humor and tension intertwined, the perfect mix for the day's climax. She knew deep down that this encounter would change the dynamics of the site. Jake would learn soon enough, and as for the stranger, He had entered her world, observed her in action, and left an impression she wouldn't forget. Wilma adjusted her hard hat, scanning the site one last time before moving on. The day was far from over, but the main event had arrived, and she had emerged unshaken, authoritative, and undeniably in control. He laughed at her, but he had no idea who really ran the show. The afternoon sun beat down on the construction site, making the steel beams glint and the dust hang thick in the air. Wilma wiped a smear of sweat from her brow, adjusting her gloves as she surveyed the workers moving efficiently under her instructions. It had been hours of constant vigilance, of coordinating, correcting, and motivating, yet the presence of the stranger lingered in her mind, a quiet puzzle she couldn't ignore. He wasn't following her orders blindly, nor was he attempting to dominate the site. Instead, he moved like a shadow of competence, quietly assisting, offering suggestions that improved workflow without overstepping. Wilma found herself curious. What was his story? Why did he know so much, and why did he seem to understand her so intuitively? A loud clang interrupted her thoughts. One of the younger workers had dropped a metal beam, and it skittered dangerously across the gravel. Wilma's reflexes kicked in. "Watch it! Step back!" she yelled, sprinting toward the beam. The stranger was at her side in an instant, guiding the worker safely out of the way. Their hands brushed briefly, and Wilma felt a spark. Professional respect mingled with the tiniest hint of something unexpected. She exhaled sharply, chastising herself for the fleeting thought. Focus, she reminded herself. Focus on the site, the safety, the work. But as she walked toward the next section, she noticed him again, watching, waiting, not with judgment but with genuine interest. His gaze was steady, confident, yet approachable. Wilma felt a flicker of cautious intrigue. "Not bad," he said casually as she coordinated a lift. "You handle this chaos better than most people handle a desk job." Wilma blinked, surprised. "Thanks. That's nice of you to say," she replied, her tone guarded but polite. He tilted his head, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "I've seen a lot of sites, but you have a rhythm. Everyone knows where to be, what to do, and no one dares question you too much." Wilma's eyebrows rose. "Not everyone gets it right the first time," she said, attempting humor though her mind was alert. "Some people think construction is just lifting and hammering. They forget the strategy, the timing, the risk calculations." He laughed lightly, not mocking but warmly, blending humor with respect. "I can see that. You're in charge for a reason. It's impressive." The compliment, though small, stirred a subtle warmth in Wilma. She had spent years proving herself, often in silence, often without recognition. Here was someone acknowledging it, not out of obligation, not because he had to, but because he genuinely saw it. For the next hour, they worked side by side, adjusting beams, directing workers, and navigating minor hazards. Every time their hands met to steady equipment or point out a correction, a spark of connection flared, brief but undeniable. Wilma noticed how naturally he read the site, anticipating potential problems, offering solutions with ease. And yet, tension remained. She couldn't fully relax. This man was competent, yes, but he was still a stranger. She didn't know his intentions, his background, or why he had appeared on her site at all. Part of her wanted to challenge him, to test his knowledge, to see if he truly belonged, or if he was just another obstacle in her day. "All right," Wilma said, directing a crew to lift a heavy beam. "Let's make sure this goes up cleanly. Timing is key." He moved alongside her, mirroring her instructions, and for a moment they were a team, synchronized in motion. But then, a misunderstanding almost caused a misstep. He reached for the beam at the same time she did, their hands colliding briefly. Wilma froze, heart racing, before realizing he had instinctively aimed to prevent a wobble, not disrupt her command. "Careful," she said, a teasing edge in her voice now. "You almost tried to steal my glory." He laughed, shaking his head. "Not my intention, just trying to help." The tension broke, replaced by a subtle, playful camaraderie. Wilma felt herself relax slightly, her chest lighter than it had been all morning. Humor had crept in, allowing the bond to form, however tentative. Throughout the afternoon, they continued to interact, each exchange layering mutual respect, curiosity, and understated competition. He joked about minor mishaps, she corrected him lightly, and both navigated the delicate balance between authority and collaboration. Wilma realized she was enjoying the challenge, the subtle dance of testing boundaries and learning from each other without even speaking of it outright. A mini cliffhanger appeared when Jake, still oblivious to the stranger's competence, tried to interrupt with a joke at Wilma's expense. The stranger's reaction was instantaneous. He stepped in with a calm, commanding tone, redirecting the crew's focus without humiliating anyone. Wilma noticed the crew's eyes widen slightly, a silent acknowledgement of his skill and poise. Wilma's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from respect. This man, he knows exactly how to handle tension. She felt a surge of admiration tempered by professional caution. The afternoon wore on, and the sun dipped lower, casting long, golden shadows across the site. Wilma and the stranger continued side by side, sharing small victories, guiding the team, and diffusing minor crises. Every successful lift, every smoothly coordinated task, strengthened the unspoken bond between them. Finally, during a brief pause, they leaned against a steel beam, catching their breath. Dust clung to their clothes, sweat dripped from foreheads, and yet there was a moment of quiet connection. Wilma glanced at him, curiosity tempered by lingering wariness. "So, you just wander onto sites like this often?" she asked, a small smirk playing at her lips. He raised an eyebrow, amused. "Only the ones that are interesting, and I had a feeling this one would be worth my time." Wilma laughed softly, shaking her head. "Confident, aren't you?" "Someone has to be," he replied lightly, "especially when it's clear who's really running things." The words caught her off guard. She paused, processing the meaning behind them. He had noticed her leadership, her authority, and yet he didn't challenge it. He reinforced it. Wilma felt a mixture of pride, amusement, and intrigue. He sees me, and he respects me. That's rare. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden shout. A stack of materials had shifted, threatening to collapse. Instantly, both of them sprang into action. Commands were shouted, hands guided, and workers repositioned. The crisis passed, and the momentary adrenaline surge left Wilma's heart pounding. As they assessed the aftermath, Wilma caught herself laughing, light and genuine. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but you make a good partner in chaos." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I could say the same about you. Most people would panic. You thrive." The sun dipped further, the shadows growing longer, yet neither moved immediately. The work was far from done, but Wilma felt a shift, not just in the dynamic with this stranger, but in herself. She realized the tension she had carried all morning was easing, replaced by a complex blend of respect, curiosity, and cautious trust. Another mini cliffhanger presented itself when Jake, finally noticing the stranger's impact on the crew, gave Wilma a skeptical look, murmuring under his breath. Wilma's lips curved into a subtle smile. He has no idea what's about to unfold. By the end of the day, Wilma and the stranger had navigated small crises, exchanged light humor, and formed an unspoken alliance that neither needed to declare. Every glance, every shared instruction, every moment of collaboration had deepened the connection, building anticipation for what came next. As they finally stepped back to survey the site, Wilma adjusted her hard hat and wiped dust from her gloves. The stranger stood beside her, hands on hips, surveying the chaos with a calm, almost detached efficiency. And yet beneath that calm, Wilma sensed genuine admiration and perhaps a hint of curiosity about her beyond the clipboard and helmet. "This is far from over," she thought, a small smile tugging at her lips. "But I like the way this is shaping up." The day ended with a subtle tension lingering in the air. One part professional respect, one part curiosity, one part unspoken challenge. Wilma knew the next encounter would push boundaries further, deepen connections, and reveal more than either of them expected. And as they walked toward the office trailer, side by side, the site quieting around them, she couldn't help but think, he doesn't just see me, he understands me, in a way most people never will. And that changes everything. Act 4. Complications. Climax. The afternoon sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the construction site. Wilma felt the day's fatigue pressing against her shoulders, but she couldn't afford to slow down. The site had its rhythm, its pace, and every worker relied on her guidance. Yet, something in the air hinted that the day's real challenges were far from over. The first sign came in the form of a sudden shrill alarm from the crane. A heavy load, precariously suspended above the partially completed framework, shifted. Workers shouted, scrambling to adjust their positions. Wilma's heart raced. She didn't hesitate. "Hold it! Step back!" she yelled, sprinting forward. Her boots kicked up dust as she reached the crane operator, guiding his hands and directing the team below. The stranger was at her side instantly. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Together they moved with synchronized precision, redirecting the workers and securing the load. Their hands brushed as they adjusted ropes and beams, a spark of connection amid the chaos. Wilma didn't notice it this time. There was no room for distraction. Minutes later, a different problem appeared. A shipment of steel had arrived, but the inventory was incorrect. Some beams were missing, others misplaced. Wilma scanned the delivery slips, her mind racing. This will delay everything if I don't act fast. She called the supplier, giving firm instructions while the crew began reorganizing what they had. Her fingers trembled slightly from adrenaline and fatigue, but she forced herself to focus. The stranger observed quietly, offering subtle guidance. "We can rearrange these temporarily," he suggested, "and avoid halting the next lift." Wilma considered his input. He had been right on every suggestion so far. Trusting him now seemed not only sensible but necessary. She nodded, implementing the adjustment. Mini victories like this were crucial. Each decision now carried weight and mistakes were costly. As they coordinated, Wilma noticed Jake hovering near the back of the site. He whispered something to a group of workers, laughter echoing slightly too loudly. Wilma's pulse quickened. "Not now, Jake, please, not now." She approached, voice calm but commanding. "Focus on the task. Safety first. Leave jokes for later." Jake smirked, but complied. The tension didn't fade entirely, but at least it was under control. Then came the unexpected, a sudden storm. Dark clouds rolled in with astonishing speed, and a gust of wind swept across the site, rattling scaffolding and loose materials. Wilma's stomach sank. She had anticipated equipment issues, human error, and logistical delays. But nature was unpredictable, and now everything she had orchestrated was at risk. "Wind's picking up," someone shouted, panic rising in their voice. Wilma's mind raced. Shelter the crew, secure the materials, protect the framework. Every second mattered. She directed workers to anchor scaffolding, secure tools, and move to safe zones. The stranger assisted seamlessly, his calm presence steadying others. But then a beam slipped. Wilma's heart leapt into her throat. Instinctively, she lunged forward, catching it just in time with the stranger helping to guide it back into place. The force nearly knocked her off balance, and adrenaline surged through every muscle. She realized the magnitude of the moment. One wrong move, and someone could be seriously injured. Sweat and rain mixed on her face, blurring vision. Her gloves were torn, her boots slick. She felt fatigue clawing at her limbs, yet she couldn't stop. This is it. One mistake could undo everything. Her chest tightened, the weight of responsibility crushing yet strangely empowering. As the storm intensified, communication broke down. Shouts were lost in the roar of wind and rain. Wilma's voice strained, trying to issue instructions. She noticed a worker, frozen near a precarious edge. Without thinking, she dashed, slipping slightly on the wet surface, catching the man just as he nearly toppled. Her heart pounded. Every second matters. Stay sharp. Meanwhile, the stranger moved with remarkable agility, assisting wherever needed, coordinating movements and keeping the crew safe. Wilma couldn't help but admire his calm under pressure, but the stakes were higher now. This wasn't just a test of skill or authority. This was a test of endurance, decision-making, and courage. Another complication arose, a partial collapse in one corner of the framework. Wilma's mind raced. "We can't let this spread. The entire section could fail." She barked orders, directing workers to stabilize beams and guide the crane operator to redistribute weight. Every instruction had to be precise, every movement exact. One slip could be catastrophic. In the midst of the chaos, Jake attempted to intervene again, making a quip that drew a few nervous laughs. Wilma shot him a sharp look, barely suppressing irritation. The stranger intervened subtly, redirecting attention without embarrassing anyone, and the crew refocused instantly. Wilma felt a fleeting sense of relief. He understood the importance of managing not just the physical hazards, but the human ones as well. The storm worsened. Rain poured in sheets, turning mud into a slick hazard. Wilma's boots sank slightly with each step, every move requiring extra effort to maintain balance. Sweat, rain, and exhaustion weighed heavily, but she pressed on, adrenaline sharpening her senses. She scanned the site, noting areas of risk, and moved decisively to prevent accidents. Then came the ultimate test, a heavy crane swing miscalculation, threatening to drop a massive beam directly into the center of the site, where several workers were still coordinating tasks. Wilma's mind worked in overdrive. "I need to act now." She sprinted toward the beam, shouting instructions while the stranger followed, guiding both workers and equipment. Her hands gripped the cable, pulling with every ounce of strength. The stranger's hands joined hers, steadying the load. Time stretched as the wind howled. Rain soaked through her clothes, and the beam swayed perilously above. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. One misstep, 1 second too late. In that moment, a thought flickered across her mind. This is everything I've built. All the respect, all the leadership, at risk. But there was no room for hesitation. She adjusted her stance, focused on the precise angle needed, and with the stranger's assistance maneuvered the beam safely into position. The crew exhaled collectively, relief washing over them. Wilma's chest heaved, her gloves torn, muscles aching, but the immediate danger had passed. Mini victories like this kept the momentum alive, but she knew the storm wasn't over, and more challenges could emerge at any second. As she moved to coordinate the next steps, another crisis appeared. A young apprentice had slipped near the wet mud, nearly sliding into machinery. Wilma lunged, catching him just in time, heart pounding. She held him steady, breathing hard, and reminded herself to maintain composure. Every worker looked to her now, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and trust. The stranger glanced at her, nodding slightly, a silent acknowledgement of her leadership. For a moment, she allowed herself a fleeting sense of camaraderie. Their partnership had strengthened under fire, mutual respect forged in the heat of chaos. Yet, the storm still raged, tension lingering in every corner of the site. As the wind tore through the half-built structure, Wilma noticed Jake attempting to take shortcuts, ignoring safety protocols in his hurry to complete tasks. Her pulse spiked. Not now. I can't risk him causing an accident. She moved swiftly, catching his attention and redirecting him firmly but professionally. The stranger's subtle support reinforced her authority, ensuring compliance without confrontation. A loud crash echoed nearby. A scaffolding plank had collapsed under the wet weight. Wilma's instincts screamed, assess, protect, stabilize. She ran toward the site, the stranger at her side, and together they guided the remaining workers to safety while securing the fallen materials. The coordination was flawless, a testament to their growing understanding of each other's leadership style. As the storm began to wane, clouds still heavy and threatening, Wilma surveyed the site. Every corner bore the marks of her and the stranger's efforts, secured beams, guided workers, averted disasters. She felt exhaustion in her bones, but also a fierce pride. She had faced the storm, both literal and metaphorical, and emerged in control. And then a final mini-cliffhanger. Jake, frustrated and humbled, muttered under his breath, clearly realizing for the first time the depth of Wilma's authority. The stranger glanced at her, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. Wilma returned it, a mixture of relief, triumph, and subtle amusement in her gaze. Everything could have fallen apart, she thought, but we held it together. Her heart still pounded as she directed the final adjustments for the day. The storm had tested every limit: physical strength, mental agility, emotional endurance. But Wilma had faced it head-on, guided by experience, instinct, and the unexpected partnership of a competent, enigmatic stranger. She adjusted her helmet, feeling the rain-soaked fabric cling to her hair, and allowed herself a rare, deep exhale. The climax of the day had arrived, and she had survived it, not alone, but through calculated action, leadership, and collaboration. The site was quieting, the workers weary but safe. Wilma's gaze met the stranger's one last time across the site. No words were exchanged, but understanding passed between them. They had navigated chaos together, tested limits, and emerged stronger, each acknowledging the other's competence and resilience. And in that quiet moment, Wilma realized she wasn't just surviving today. She was asserting her command, proving her authority, and forming an alliance that would shape what came next. The storm had been brutal, but she had proven herself. And Jake, well, he was about to learn a lesson in respect he wouldn't forget. The storm had passed. The sun peeked through the dissipating clouds, casting golden light across the construction site. Dust mixed with lingering puddles reflecting the chaos that had just occurred. Yet there was a calm now, a sense of completion. Wilma stood at the center of it all, surveying the site with a mixture of exhaustion and quiet triumph. Workers moved with careful efficiency, following her directions but now with renewed respect. The day had tested every limit: skill, patience, endurance, and composure, and Wilma had faced it all head-on. She adjusted her hard hat, feeling the weight of responsibility and the satisfaction of having kept everyone safe, having kept the project on track. The stranger approached, clipboard in hand, a calm presence against the backdrop of the recovering site. Wilma's gaze met his, and for a brief moment they shared a silent acknowledgement of everything they had overcome together. Words felt unnecessary. Their collaboration had spoken louder than any conversation could. "You handled that impressively," he said finally, voice steady, tinged with genuine respect. "I've seen a lot of supervisors, but you command without needing to prove yourself at every turn." Wilma felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of pride and humility. She nodded, brushing mud from her gloves. "Thanks. Today it wasn't easy, but we managed because we all worked together." Her glance swept across the site, catching workers tidying equipment, sharing quiet smiles, and offering each other small nods of acknowledgement. The respect of the team was palpable, and it grounded her in a way words never could. The stranger's smile softened, almost imperceptibly. "I'd say you earned their respect, and mine, in every sense." Wilma allowed herself a small laugh, the tension of the past hours finally easing. "I guess the joke's on those who doubted me today," she said lightly, thinking of Jake and the others who had underestimated her earlier. There was no anger in her voice, only quiet triumph. The lesson had been made clear naturally through action rather than argument. Jake approached cautiously, eyes avoiding hers at first. The humiliation of the day's events weighed on him, but Wilma met him with calm authority, letting him see that respect was not something given lightly, but earned. He nodded quietly, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. No words were needed. The storm had spoken for her. Wilma took a deep breath, her mind reflecting on the events that had unfolded. The day had been more than a test of skill or leadership. It had been a testament to perseverance, courage, and adaptability. Every obstacle, every moment of doubt, had been an opportunity to prove not only her ability but her character. She realized that true leadership wasn't about asserting dominance. It was about guiding, supporting, and earning trust, often under pressure that tested every boundary. Her gaze drifted to the stranger, who had now joined her in surveying the site. The unspoken partnership that had formed during the chaos had been a revelation. He hadn't tried to overshadow her authority. Instead, he had complemented it, moving in sync with her without question. Wilma felt a rare, profound respect for someone who understood balance, who recognized competence without needing to claim it for himself. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what might come next. This encounter, unexpected and intense, had shifted something within her. She had faced uncertainty, danger, and challenge, and emerged not only unscathed, but strengthened. The lesson was clear. Resilience, composure, and collaboration were far more powerful than ego, appearance, or assumptions. As the workers gathered their tools and began leaving the site, Wilma addressed them with calm authority, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Great work today, everyone. I know it was tough, but we pulled through, and we did it together." Their nods, smiles, and murmurs of acknowledgement filled her with quiet satisfaction. Respect had been earned, not demanded. The stranger stepped beside her, hands on his hips, observing the crew. "They'll remember today," he said, "and they'll remember how it was handled." Wilma nodded. "They'll remember that leadership isn't about who laughs the loudest or who thinks they're in charge. It's about action, responsibility, and care. It's about showing up every single time." He glanced at her, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "And sometimes it's about proving that the person you underestimate might be the one holding everything together." Wilma allowed herself a small, private laugh, remembering the earlier moments when Jake had mocked her. The irony of the day was undeniable. "He laughed at me, but the truth was clear. I ran this site, I led this team, and I kept everyone safe." As the site emptied and the sun dipped toward the horizon, Wilma's thoughts turned inward. She reflected on the challenges, the moments of tension, and the subtle victories. Each obstacle had tested her in a different way, physically, mentally, emotionally, but she had emerged stronger. Leadership, she realized, was a continuous test of character, one that required courage, adaptability, and empathy. The stranger looked at her one last time before walking toward his own vehicle. Wilma felt a flicker of gratitude for his presence, his assistance, and the unspoken understanding they had shared. He had arrived as a stranger, observed her in action, and departed leaving respect intact and a subtle bond formed through shared experience. Wilma adjusted her hard hat once more and turned toward the emptying site. The day had ended, but its lessons lingered. She understood now, more deeply than ever, that respect, authority, and leadership were earned not by appearance, title, or loudness, but by action, integrity, and the courage to rise when circumstances demanded it. A gentle smile played on her lips as she considered the future. There would be more challenges, more storms, and more unexpected events, but she was ready, stronger, wiser, and unshaken. And she knew that she could face whatever came next, not just because she was capable, but because she understood what it meant to lead. Turning to the empty site one last time, Wilma spoke quietly to herself, a reflection that seemed to resonate in the fading light. The world won't always recognize your authority, but you'll know it's earned, and that's what matters. Her gaze lifted to the horizon. The storm had passed. The site was calm, the workers safe, and her leadership undeniable. And somewhere between exhaustion and triumph, she felt a profound sense of satisfaction. In the end, everyone learned that respect isn't about appearances, jokes, or assumptions. It's earned through action, courage, and unwavering commitment. And you? Have you ever witnessed someone defy expectations and prove themselves in a way that left everyone in awe? Wilma turned, walking toward the trailer, a final glance over her shoulder at the site she had commanded. She felt empowered, resolute, and ready for the next challenge, whatever it might be. Respect, competence, and leadership aren't given, they're proven, and Wilma had done just that.